Hey everyone, today I'm going to give a more in-depth review of Black Widow. This will be a spoiler review, so if you haven't seen the movie yet, please make sure to see it before watching this video. In this review, I'm going to go over my thoughts about the movie's characters, plot, and a few other elements, and I'll conclude with my star rating of the film out of 10. Afterwards, you'll get to hear the opinion of today's guest, Adam Reid. At the end of the review, please let me know your thoughts about this movie in the comments. Whether you agree or disagree with the opinions in this video, please keep all discussion respectful. Now, let's get started. I have mixed feelings about the characters of this movie. On one hand, the two main protagonists, Black Widow herself and Yelena, are pretty solid. Black Widow has been a likable character to me throughout most of the MCU, and I liked her in this movie as well. However, I feel like they missed the opportunity to significantly build upon her character. We got to see her backstory with her fake family in Ohio and her time as a Black Widow Russian agent, but other than that, I really don't feel like we saw anything new from Black Widow. She didn't seem any different to me in this movie, and while her background being explored was interesting, it didn't have a lot of consequence for her character later in this movie. Moving to the second main protagonist, I honestly think that Yelena was the star of this movie. Seeing a brand new character was very refreshing for me, and I actually found her to be a more likable character than Black Widow. Yelena has the toughness and skill of Black Widow, but she couples it with more emotion than Black Widow does. This was particularly evident in scenes discussing Yelena and Black Widow's childhood. Yelena still having strong feelings for her fake family is really tragic, and it genuinely made me feel for her. Overall, because of all of this, plus her sense of humor, Yelena was, in my opinion, the best character in this movie. Now, moving to the bad characters, I think pretty much all of the side characters and villains were poor in this movie. Alexei was just a stupid buffoon that was played for laughs and was completely unbelievable as some kind of Russian superhero. Sure, he could be funny at times, but as we can see with Yelena, it's possible to be funny and also be a well-written character. Unfortunately, Alexei was anything but well-written. I think the one saving grace for Alexei was the scene when he sings American Pie with Yelena. We saw that Yelena loved this song during her fake childhood, and because her fake childhood was the closest thing she had to a normal upbringing, it means everything to her. Alexei singing the song brought back great memories for Yelena, and the moment that they shared felt very genuine. I wish we could have seen more of this stuff from Alexei, but unfortunately, pretty much everything else was either him making silly jokes or getting destroyed in the fight. Melina, Black Widow and Yelena's fake mother, was pretty boring and underdeveloped, making for a lame character. I really don't feel like there's much else to say about her. Despite how bad I think the side characters were, I think the villains were the worst characters in this movie. Dreykov is clearly the main villain, and what makes him so bad is, ironically, the fact that he's hardly in the movie. We see him a little bit in the beginning of the movie, and then he doesn't return until the end. This significantly hurt his character because it gave the audience no time to learn about him. If we saw more of him, we could have seen more of his power and evil actions, which would pay off when Black Widow and the others defeated him in the end. Without this kind of development, it wasn't nearly as satisfying when he died as it could have been. Taskmaster was just as disappointing as Dreykov. She had a cool suit, and her fight scenes were good, but that was about it. She had a better presence throughout the movie than Dreykov did, but it was all mainly her fights. The only character development that she got was the short backstory that we were told about and briefly shown. According to the backstory, Black Widow blew up a building with Taskmaster as a child in it, and it was presumed that the explosion killed Taskmaster. From that, it's supposed to be an emotional connection between Black Widow and Taskmaster. For me, this did hardly anything to show me who Taskmaster is and why I should be invested in her character. Without more exposure to her background, Taskmaster was nothing more than a cool-looking character to me. Dreykov and Taskmaster being poor villains really hurt this movie. Having good villains in a movie is just as important as having good heroes because they build off of each other. Therefore, this movie having poor villains really hurt Black Widow and Yelena, and the overall story itself. As for the plot of this movie, I thought it was about average compared with the rest of the MCU. Going back to something from Black Widow's past was a good idea. I enjoyed seeing Black Widow's fake childhood, and it was a nice circle to see Black Widow team up with Yelena, Alexei, and Melina to defeat the man that caused her childhood to be the way it was. However, this story did have some issues. Some things were simply silly, like Black Widow and Yelena fighting each other for no reason other than the fact that it's cool to see them fight. It would be like having Han Solo and Lando Calrissian fight each other when they first meet up in The Empire Strikes Back to see who has the superior hand-to-hand combat abilities. In both situations, the fight makes no sense plot-wise. Another issue I have with the story is the ridiculous stuff that Black Widow survives. I get it, the MCU is a movie universe where people have superpowers and all kinds of unrealistic things happen. Despite this, any fictional story needs to be grounded in its own universe. You can have supernatural things happen, but they need to have some definition and limitations. In the MCU, certain characters have superpowers and others don't. Black Widow is one of the ones who doesn't have any powers, making her a regular human being. Therefore, when she falls from a rooftop, or is literally in free fall, midair, surrounded by dangerous flying debris, it's pretty absurd. One last issue I'll mention is how ridiculous Dreykov's control over his agents is. Are we seriously supposed to believe that he uses pheromones to prevent them from attacking him? I mean, how does that even work? Again, this is obviously a fictional story, but without any kind of in-story explanation for this pheromone thing, it just seems stupid to me. Outside of the characters and the plot, I think the visuals were excellent, and the fight choreography was good. Considering everything I've just discussed, my rating for Black Widow is a 5 out of 10 star rating. The terrible side characters, lame villains, and annoying issues with the plot were particularly frustrating to me, but I still had some fun with this movie. Like I said previously, Yelena was the star of this movie for me, and her presence really elevated this film. On top of that, the action was entertaining, and Black Widow herself was still exciting. Now that you've heard from me, let's turn it over to Adam to hear his opinion.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be on the channel. Alright, well, let's get into my thoughts. Okay, so I'll start by saying this. Black Widow, well, it's a good Marvel movie. And to me, the film lives up to what one might expect from a Marvel movie. It goes without saying that we expect Marvel movies to deliver with their action sequences. And this one certainly does. As viewers, we're treated to some glorious scenes. To start off, we were given an almost Fast and Furious-esque car chase as we hear our first glimpse of the hidden life of Natasha's and of Yelena's family. Later on, we're given the "we are siblings who split ways then came back together and then fought about it" treatment by both our heroines as we witness their clash of their past disputes. Though, of course, it's a short reunion as they have to deal with the Taskmaster through the streets of Budapest. Not Budapest, Budapest. The film then thrusts our daring prison estate by the Red Baron at us as we're still trying to fathom the $100 million worth of explosive stunts and sequences that we've already seen barely halfway into the film. Make no mistake, Black Widow is a genuine Marvel movie with some stunning visuals and seat-shaking effects. Behind all this action-packed drama in the movie, though, we're led to believe that there is a root to our story. In another beautiful opening sequence, we're shown the ruthlessness of Black Widow's and Yelena's upbringing as it relates to the Cold War. Two young children ripped from their shell of an existence, tranquilized, then carried out as their world crumbles. And of course, we know as viewers that Natasha has dealt with her past, having joined the Avengers and left and, now having her own movie. But for Yelena, it was all real. It was too real. And of course, the film shows us how she's had to deal with her past. First, going with S.H.I.E.L.D., and we get to see how it's transformed her. And of course, we get a sense of loss from Yelena as Natasha tells her sister about her family's true past in front of their so-to-be parents. And so for me, this was the most impactful film, the most impactful moment of a Black Widow movie filled with Yelena moments. And given that we know Natasha's in the ground, well, of course, this is spoilers. Yeah, she's dead. Given that we know that and that Yelena will most likely be in feature films, what do I think of this movie? Well, I think that this Black Widow movie was truly Yelena's movie. But those are just my thoughts. Well, back to you, Optimus.
Thanks for sharing your thoughts with us, Adam. It was awesome to hear from you. Thank you everyone for watching. See y'all next time.